Welcome to the Chelsea Roar, exclusively as part of the Dynamo Podcast Network, where we talk about everything Chelsea Football Club related. With me, your host, Ian Dynamo Kelly, and joining me today, a very special guest, a Liverpool fan, although, Mr. Niall, the shopkeeper Hogan. Welcome to the Chelsea Roar. You make your debut on this show here, Niall.
How are you, my friend? All good?
Very well. I thought there'd be none better than to bring the host of the upper tier and all of the many other football shows that you have at this stage on the Dynamo Podcast Network. The upper tier, the transfer show, the Shankly session.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this is a Chelsea Football Club show, and to be fair, any Chelsea fans out there that are watching this that are thinking, why are you bringing a Liverpool fan on? Anyone knows Niall? I bring Niall on today, basically to talk everything Chelsea that's happened, I suppose, in the Euros, and of course the absolute madness of the football transfer window, which is starting to heat up big time. So the timing of this show today, it couldn't have been any better. So we are going to talk about, of course, Lionel Messi and the impending arrival of an old Chelsea youth player. So not really. We know he wasn't a youth player, but still. So yeah, Niall, where do we start today? I mean, I suppose there's only really one place to start, and that is the absolute blockbuster announcement today that was broken by initially Fabrizio Romano, claiming that Lionel Messi will not be playing for Barcelona anymore, and then obviously confirmed by Barcelona FC themselves. Where do we start on this one? This was kind of unexpected because we did a show last night on one of your shows where we were talking about Tottenham and talking about how Barcelona and Real Madrid get bailed out all the time. Well, not today.
I did mention it last night when we were talking that there was a chance that they wouldn't be in a position financially to register that Messi new deal, and that there was a real chance that Messi would find himself out in the cold until January potentially. Because we're looking at Barcelona at the moment, they're really struggling to unload players at the moment and trying to, get in any sort of money for them and bridge that 80 million gap on the wage bill. That capping at 200, apparently they're at about 280. So there's a number of players they haven't been able to register, and they don't seem to be doing any business in the transfer window in terms of outgoings. They're really struggling, and I reckon there's a lot of clubs at the moment waiting to pounce on this carcass, say last week at the transfer show, and you could potentially see a Philip Coutinho or a number of players of that ilk going out of that club for what we would regard as reasonable money. I'm thinking the likes of Pedri, your man Ansu Fati, these kind of players who are real good players, even Dembele, potentially Griezmann. They could go for a cut price in the last week of this transfer window with what's going on there at the moment. But sticking with Messi, probably for some, probably a surprise. I'm not that surprised because obviously he's the big portion of that 80 million, if you like, you know what I mean? And how many players are there that you have to take out to match by taking him out? You're probably looking at maybe 3, maybe 4 players to match what he's getting paid, So it's probably not that surprising, but it's do you know what it is? When I read it today, I'm thinking, I hope we don't go the same story like what happened with Leeds, where these guys have been financially mismanaged. A brilliant club with brilliant players who have entertained us for years. The whole Ronaldo, Messi kind of head-to-head over the years that we've lived through it. We're so lucky. And I just hope this doesn't go down the road of being like another Leeds situation, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's one way of looking at it, all right. And I suppose it is probably, the major news of the summer. I'm sure Jack Grealish feels like, God damn it, they had to wait to steal my thunder. And probably a certain Belgian striker as well going, what the hell's going on? Because this is the biggest, this is the end of an era right now. We all knew Messi was going to leave at some point, but we probably thought it would be under different circumstances and not where it was a gun to the head kind of situation. But This is a Chelsea transfer show and a Chelsea Football Club show, not just a transfer show, but we are in the transfer market. So it would only be apropos for us to talk about Chelsea. And when you go on Twitter, the named clubs that keep popping up are, of course, Chelsea, Man City, and PSG. I saw some Juve fan trying to make a shout for Juve, putting him Ronaldo together. No. So, I mean, obviously City are going to be there just purely because of the whole Guardiola links and stuff like that. But I read a great piece by a Chelsea fan earlier, and I would love to credit him, but I don't know who it was because I only glanced over it. But going back to a time, the one football club, if we're not saying this is going to happen, but let's get people excited and play hypothetical for a moment. And listen, stranger things have happened with Chelsea Football Club. If they want something, they get it. Mm-hmm. One of the things that they brought my attention back to was, of course, early on in Messi's career, saying how much he admired Chelsea Football Club. And that would have been because the one English football club that Messi has been synonymous with over the years is Chelsea, because of the amount of times Barcelona and Chelsea have played each other and the battles that they've had, and the fact that he'd never scored against an English opposition, but namely Chelsea. He had missed penalties against Chelsea. And there always seemed to be a kind of a mutual respect there. Obviously, the club would respect the talent like Messi, but in turn, Messi always spoke very fondly of Chelsea. So it's kind of interesting when you think of that if a player has his choice of where he can go, and money's not really the issue here, I don't think either, when you're mentioning any of these clubs. It's all about what tickles the fancy also of a player who might do a year or two stint. So I heard it was a good shout when you look at all that. And you take Pep Guardiola out of the equation, it seems like a fit, doesn't it? Messi in London, wearing blue.
Yeah, I don't think PSG are in the game at all for this at all. I think PSG have enough problems trying to do what they're doing with Kylian Mbappe and various other players that they brought in.
They've brought in big names this year for major money.
Absolutely. So I think the only two teams for me in this game are really Chelsea and Man City. And the real losers in this could really be potentially Lukaku and Harry Kane, because Harry Kane now seems surplus to requirements in terms of the transfer window, because if Pep Guardiola thinks he has a chance of signing Messi over Harry Kane, I mean, that's a no-brainer to me, you know what I mean? And in terms of Jack Grealish, and you mentioned him there, I wouldn't be too upset if I thought I had traded in Ollie Watkins for Lionel Messi. I'd be pretty happy, But I just think,
me too.
I think Chelsea is a great fit at the moment. I think the one thing that's happened to Chelsea over the last, say, year or so is they've brought in some very exciting young talent. They've brought in a fantastic coach, without a shadow of a doubt. They're in a great location in London. You know what I mean? Like, what more would you want? I mean, you go to PSG, you see it already when Pogba thought he was going to PSG, and the fans are already out with the banners hating him. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a toxic environment a little bit. And I don't know whether the banners would be any more pleasing for Messi, to be honest. And I don't see a Messi Neymar get together again, really, to be honest.
No,
I just don't see it. But I tell you what I would be very excited about, and I know I'm a Liverpool fan, so it's hard to say this, but imagine a situation where you have Lionel Messi and Kai Havertz and all these guys at Chelsea. This is going to be so exciting if it was to happen. And we know Roman has the checkbook, so it's not going to be a problem.
Well, let's look at the numbers there. If we were to talk about it hypothetically, say Chelsea go, okay, you just want 100 million for Lukaku. Chelsea could literally throw 100 million into Lionel Messi on a 3-year contract. You know what I mean? And there's your player for 3 years.
I suppose the question to you as a Chelsea fan is, as exciting as Messi is, and it's not dissimilar with us as Liverpool fans when we speak about Kylian Mbappe and all the stories that were going around and him playing basketball with LeBron and the jerseys and all this kind of stuff. In terms of Chelsea going forward, and you're looking out 3, 4, 5 years with this youth you've brought in and everything else, is Lukaku the better fit? I know from a marketing point of view, obviously Messi is unbelievable. And I know it's very hard to turn down what we regard as the best player in our era that we've ever watched, turning him down to go to your club. But is Lukaku a better fit in terms of Project Chelsea with Tuchel? Or would Messi be a kind of like come in for 2 or 3 years, do what he does, because we know he's kind of a mercenary. Let's be honest there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just kind of thinking from your point of view.
It's an interesting one because, I mean, you're getting Lukaku was already 28 going into his 29th year. So, I mean, a player of that magnitude, you're probably only really be getting the 3 years out of him anyway. You know, at his absolute peak. My worry with Lukaku is, like, does he keep that new kind of regime that he's been on where he shed all that weight and all that kind of stuff, and does that come up on him with later years? I'm only being pessimistic there. I'm not saying that would be the case. Whereas Messi's 33, but he doesn't look like a guy that would be slowing down in 2 or 3 years' time. Too much is what I'm saying. So even though Messi has those 4 years, 5 years on Lukaku, it's still Lionel Messi we're talking about here. You know, I'm wondering, like, some of that magic dust that Messi has, does that rub off on the likes of, you know, Christian Pulisic and Timo Werner and Kai Havertz, like you mentioned? I mean, you're damn right it does. Do you know what I mean? You couldn't be around that man on the training ground and then not rub off on you. But then at the same token, it's like, yeah, I've been really excited about this Lukaku deal, which I think will go through, to be honest with you. It depends how really Chelsea want to get. Do they want to go with Lukaku and say, right, we were going to spend another couple of $100 million next year? Why not get Messi in there as well for the wings? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, it's a club. The club definitely has the financial means to do both. There's no doubt about that. Especially when we're not in financial fair play year. So, I mean, it's altering the wage structure a little bit for a year or two. Good Lord. I mean, it's exciting to think about, isn't it? I don't want Chelsea fans to get too excited about it either, because, you know, like, we know he's a mercenary. I think it does come down to if both teams. I think both teams could easily match each other in terms of offer. It depends on really what he himself wants. You know,
it's the conversation. It's the conversation with Pep, isn't it? Really,
it is.
It hinges on that a bit, doesn't it?
It does, but I think you're looking then at someone like Tuchel, who is a younger Pep in the making, basically, and you're thinking, really, this is quite exciting for a lot of players now. Do you know what I mean? Does Messi say, well, you know, I kind of like the idea of living in, you know, a nice part of London more so than Manchester.
The only thing I'd say, though, if you were listening this evening, when word broke about this, a lot of reports were coming out very quickly that Man City had abandoned the Kane project.
This is what I'm thinking.
So my thinking is, has conversations been happening there already? And was Messi fully aware, with the way things were panning out, that there was no chance of getting registered and that he had to find an alternative? And before City pulled the trigger potentially on that 150 million with Kane, has a phone call being made to Pep Guardiola to say, listen, this lad's going to be available. What do you think? Because that Kane decision is very quick, and it did coincide with the news breaking about Messi.
Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, that was the first team I thought of, and then I obviously heard Chelsea's name in there as well. The one thing that we know about Chelsea and Marina, there is no better negotiator in football than Marina Granovskaya. And the thing about Chelsea is that we all know as well is that they are very, very quiet about their business. You don't hear anything generally till it gets signed or until it's very close to getting signed. I mean, they pulled the wool over our eyes with this whole Haaland thing. Like, as Fabrizio Romano said, Chelsea didn't even make a bid or even an offer for Haaland. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's actually Lukaku, which you and me kind of on our own quietly predicted, didn't we? That we saw the Lukaku thing coming, being more realistic. Listen, I'd be happy with either or. Of course, I'd be happy with both, but you can't be greedy. I'm just trying to get my fellow Chelsea fans here to get excited about the prospects and seeing that, you know, Uncle Roman has us in the conversation again with these things, you know, and I think that's the excitement and the pull about Chelsea Football Club as a brand again, but also this exciting young coach that we have. I mean, I don't doubt for a fact that he is probably in the top 3 coaches in the world right now. Do you know what I mean? I mean, if you're on paper, he's probably the best in Europe purely because he's the European champion. But you know what I mean? He's definitely up there with your Klopps and your Guardiolas and Contes and, you know, everything in between. But It's an interesting one. If I had to make a prediction, I'm sorry to disappoint Chelsea fans. I see him going to City because I'm not sure how many eggs they're going to put into that basket. But at the same token, I would not be surprised over the next 48 hours if you heard Chelsea's name being fucking branded about with a lot stronger, you know what I mean, than it is at the moment. So,
well, I think that's already happened. I think that's already happened because, as I said already, I think only yourselves and City are in that conversation. And I don't think it's even a case of a negotiation, because I think Lionel Messi will just say what he wants because his back's to the wall now as well. So he's just going to turn around and say what he wants. And either Chelsea will write that check or City will write that check. And then it comes down to his relationship with Pep Guardiola and his history, or does he want to go to the current European champions?
This is, you know what? Say that again for me, Noel. Say that again for me.
Does he want to? It hinges on basically his previous relationship with Pep Guardiola and the conversation to be had, or does he want to come to the current European champions?
Say that last part one more time for me.
The current European champions. I know, because this is the first podcast we've done practically since you lifted the trophy. So we're still, you're still. I don't think you guys have rejoiced in that enough. From what I've seen with Chelsea fans, I thought that would have been a hell of a lot more out there. That I don't think they're promoting themselves not near enough with what they achieved last year, winning that European Cup on the strength of a half season with Thomas Tuchel. It's amazing.
It is within the swarm. It's there. It's definitely there. I think we like to kind of go about our business now that it's like with a nice, elegant walk down the road and just show the shine of the trophy a little bit, rather than your United or your no offense, Liverpool fans that be kind of just in your face about it. I think we know what it is. That's why we sang that. You know, we invented that chant. We know what we are. You know what I mean? And like, we know London is blue. It has been for a long time. You know, I mean, you've kind of made me think, and you're getting me a little bit more excited about this now, because make no mistake about it, City may have had conversations with Messi, but you can guarantee his representatives would have been putting the feelers out probably to both clubs and even the likes of United as well. Do you know what I mean? Just to see who wants to take a bite. And I suppose United, I don't see that happening, but you have to put them in the conversation just purely because they'll want their name in that conversation.
Absolutely not. The only way they're getting in that conversation is through Messi's agent. They are not in that conversation whatsoever.
I don't believe so. No. I don't believe so. I think it boils down to two clubs. Like I said earlier in a group chat, I don't see an American move at this point in his career. I see that as a retirement thing. Do you know what I mean? Where he's closer to Argentina or whatever, closer to home. But you kidding me? Like the current, Copa America champions and then the current European champions mixing together when two worlds collide, good Lord, it's like the irresistible force against the immovable object coming together.
I suppose the excitement as well, if you think about it, imagine like the likes of, say, Mason Mount or Reece James going into training every morning with Lionel Messi. You know what I mean? Like, just imagine what it does for that kind of squad. Antonio Rudiger going in and he's standing up towards a Lionel Messi in training and stuff like that and all, you know what I mean? So the benefit of this could be huge in terms of Chelsea's future, even beyond the Messi years if it was to happen. You know what I mean? As you said, the sprinkling through the whole squad, if such young lads there, like imagine the player a Kai Havertz is going to become, potentially a Timo Werner, even Lukaku. You know what I mean? Even if Lukaku came in as well, imagine how Lukaku would benefit playing with a Lionel Messi. Any player, it goes without saying, any player. But I just think, I know where you're coming from, because you kind of have to dampen the excitement a bit. We've experienced it already because we're literally linked with everyone at this stage, and it's so frustrating at times. But I just think, I think when an opportunity like this comes knocking, and I think if you do really have the opportunity, and if this is sincere to the point where they really are edging for a move and he has to find a club, and it is yourselves and City in the conversation, imagine the bragging rights for who wins that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's not unlike Chelsea to do something like that, considering we did it last year with Kai Havertz as well. You know, we know all the big clubs in Europe wanted to sign him, and then of course back in 2012 when that famous Eden Hazard tweet said he's signing for the champions of Europe. You know, it was the same thing. So it wouldn't be unlike Chelsea to just come out of nowhere and just kind of steal a march in the last minute. But we'll leave the Messi kind of stuff there for a minute because, as I said, don't want to get Chelsea fans too excited. But I suppose because his name has creeped up now, it's kind of dampened the name of Romelu Lukaku, which has had everybody excited for the last 48 hours.
Yeah,
and I don't think that I think that needs to be not overlooked because this transfer looks like it's 100% a go, and it is literally the prodigal son coming home. You know, a player from Belgium who idolized Didier Drogba, to the point where he completely mimicked his game and looked like he mimicked his height and weight as well.
Yeah.
Got signed by Chelsea as an 18-year-old, massive Chelsea fan all of his life because of Drogba and Lampard and players like that. Some great pictures of him when he was like 9 years old at the club with the jerseys and all.
Yeah.
And it was always seemed like it was going to happen. And then obviously once the move did happen, I think it came too soon and he probably got overwhelmed by the fact that it was Chelsea he was playing for.
Yeah.
Didn't really get a look in as well, thanks to Jose Mourinho. And Mo Salah is playing for Liverpool, thanks to Jose Mourinho. So, thanks Jose. But he went off to Everton. Good Lord, his goal record there, his goal ratio there is unbelievable. And even at Man United, when they were calling him overweight and all that kind of stuff, even though it was a medical condition apparently that he had, his numbers again were phenomenal. Then goes to Inter Milan and just absolutely tears it up in the Serie A. And it's kind of one of those things that it was like the book was never closed, but we almost forgot about him a little bit. And I think if you recall in the Euros, knowing that Chelsea were going all out for a striker this year, I kept saying to you, it's just something about Lukaku. I want to see him in blue again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like when you look at the picture of him at United the year before and then look at the picture of him at Inter Milan, I mean, he's a massive man. Like, he's a massive frame. He's 6'3" and built like a fucking absolute pro wrestler. But he just cut so much weight, didn't he? Unnecessary weight, and he's just lean as can be now.
I think the golden ticket really for that transfer is the fact that I believe he has unfinished business in the Premier League. And I really think with the way he was treated, I think he'd like to stick one to United.
And you think unfinished business with Chelsea as well, I'd say, after what I'd said. But yeah, I think with United, though, I think you're right.
Yeah, I think he got a hard time at United, in fairness. I think it's not unusual. I mean, we've seen it happening with Luke Shaw as well in his time there as well, when he was carrying weight from injuries and stuff like that and all. And the absolute piss taken out of these guys and stuff like that and all, But I think with Lukaku, I think he was very unfortunate in his time at United as well, in terms of who he got to play under, and the kind of atmosphere that was in there was quite toxic at times with Van Gaal and with Jose and stuff like that. And I don't think it was going to work out. And then I think sort of with Solskjaer going in there as a manager, it's hard when you're at that Lukaku level. It's hard to convince him of that kind of thing, And I just think he has so much unfinished business. I think he obviously has unfinished business there from a childhood with Chelsea. I think he has unfinished business in the Premier League. I think he's at his peak right now in terms of physicality, fitness, ball play, his all-round game mentality. Everything is solid at the moment. And I think, good Lord, if you were dropping him into that situation there with a Thomas Tuchel and all those other bits of the jigsaw at Chelsea now that are slotting together, this guy is a 30, 35 goal a season, no problem.
It's funny as well, isn't it? And just another little quote from Lukaku, which I thought was amazing. He only takes advice about football from Didier Drogba, Nicolas Anelka, and Thierry Henry. Yeah, I'll have some of that, please.
If you get a blend of that, you'd be doing all right, wouldn't you?
two of which are absolute Chelsea legends as well. So
yeah,
I'm happy to hear that. But also, I've been looking at, and he did last season on the pitch. Had a goal disallowed against Spurs last night, which again wasn't offside. Not even nearly. I heard them talking about it on the TalkSport on the sports bar. Looked a lot sharper. Even his touch, his interlink in play with Kai Havertz looks like it's just improved so much. So when we saw Timo Werner destroy, even Premier League teams in the Champions League, like he did with Tottenham, and in the Bundesliga, he always had your man Sebastian Haller to play with, a big tall guy that had good movement and mobility. Can you imagine like someone like Timo Werner, where the pressure isn't on him as much to score the goals that was expected of him last year, playing off the likes of Lukaku? I mean, that's the potential there. Is, it's like we said in previous upper tier episodes, Timo Werner didn't become a bad player overnight. And his work rate is absolutely astronomical. And I think when you're a player that has that much work rate, it has to come right for you at some point, doesn't it? When you're hitting the bar 30 times in a season or whatever it was, it's got to, the look has to drop. So I mean, I think the potential kind of partnerships and lineups there with a Lukaku move is just phenomenal. And then your favorite Chelsea player probably at the moment, or one of them, our German sensation, the second coming of Zinedine Zidane himself, Kai Havertz.
Incredible. And when you look at the two of them as well, I mean, I look at Timo Werner and I'd be quite critical of him. And I guess from my point of view, it's kind of like, my expectation is more, even though there was a lack of a pre-season, all this COVID stuff going on. There were so many factors last season that affected him. But this would be a huge season for him, because the likes of a Thomas Tuchel doesn't suffer fools gladly. You know what I mean? And he won't mess around there. You're either up for it or you're not, because he knows if he persists with that kind of situation, it's his neck on the line as well. You know what I mean? Because Chelsea don't mess around when it comes to changes. That's the one thing that we kind of at times admire Roman Abramovich for it. I mean, this is a guy who sent Lampard packing and brought Tuchel in. He made that hard decision, and that landed a European Cup. So, you know what I mean? When those decisions have to be made, Roman is the man as far as I'm concerned on those kind of decisions. But I just think in talking about Kai Havertz, again, he was another one who had a tough time as well. And, he got the COVID and he was recovering from that. And then he was suffering from this long COVID that they talk about and stuff like that. But by God, towards the end of the season, he was unplayable. He was just unbelievable. And in the Euros, he was the absolute German starlet in the Euros without a shadow of a doubt. And remember, he was surrounded by absolute world-class players, and he was the guy who shone. And even like that goal that he took in the European final. And this is why I kind of still stick a little bit with Timo Werner, because that goal was developed out of Werner's movement, if you remember, of course, in the Champions League final, which was absolutely outstanding. It was as much about his movement as it was about Havertz's finish. And I just think created that gap that opened right up for Havertz to create that goal. It was incredible piece of movement, you know what I mean? So if that's part of his game, that's great. But he needs to understand that the reality of being at a club like Chelsea, he has to be a minimum of a 20-goal season man, or 25.
I agree.
That has to happen. And I think with Tuchel, I'd say Tuchel is the kind of guy, we've seen him managing on the sideline since he came in. You saying he nearly had a punch-up with Alonso that time and everything. This is a guy who has quite a short fuse, and he ain't going to mess around. There's no room for that, you know what I mean? Because you're going to come into this season now as European champion, so there's a level of pressure there as well, and expectation, both at a club level and at a fan base level. And if Werner doesn't hit the ground running very quickly, I think you could have elements of that fan base there and at the club as well, turning around going, well, hang on a minute, what have we actually bought here? Is this guy mentally capable of being the guy up front, the leader for Chelsea, or is he not? And a decision might have to be made, you know what I mean? I think your point about Lukaku coming in and playing with him, and as you mentioned, how he played in the Bundesliga, I think would benefit him a lot. But I think there's only so many of those elements you can put in place when you have to turn around eventually and say, well, is this guy actually the guy, or is the Bundesliga kind of a little bit of a bit of a fool's game in terms of leading us along in what we think of players? Now, obviously, Kai Havertz is not the case, obviously.
Yeah, but isn't that case in point then with someone like a Haaland, where you're not probably going balls deep on him in terms of, hitting that 150 million, 160 million barrier that they're looking at. You're like, right, okay, he looks like he's tailor-made for the Premier League, but so does Timo Werner. I mean, Timo Werner is probably a bit shorter. I think he's about, 5'10", 5'11".
Yeah.
But he's a stocky little player, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And his pace is phenomenal. I think as well, we forget it was a COVID year. And the thing about Timo Werner is it's only in recent years that we've started writing players off after one season. I think his goal and assist levels were pretty phenomenal last year. Bar what we expected. I agree with you. It felt to some people like we were sold a bill of goods in that sense. But I think it's more a case that you had to look at, like, Lampard kind of fucked him up a little bit as well by putting him out on the wing constantly and pursuing with Tammy. And this is when he was scoring goals in the centre forward position.
Yeah.
And then he was bringing the golden boy Tammy in, which is what did frustrate a lot of us Chelsea fans with Lampard, I have to say. Tammy's not up to it at a Chelsea. I'm sorry. He has done well. We appreciate it. But I think at a Chelsea, if you're not, his first year, I think he was top scorer up until like Christmas. And then it was just gone. Yeah. And, then he was demanding like a 200 grand a week contract, to match Hudson-Odoi. Hudson-Odoi is a different type of player. And I mean, Hudson-Odoi is another player that I think Tuchel seems to really like. He seems to have shone in pre-season. I'd like to talk about him a little bit. I think the potential is still there with him. I know you're a big fan of Hudson-Odoi as well. You like his movement. And I think if you look at Tuchel, he's kind of instilled that confidence to go and run at players again. You know what I mean? So that's a nice little one. You can see even with Reece James, he's taking his time with Reece James, mixing him with Asby. That's what great managers do. They're like, right, concentrate on the basic things. Yeah. Another player that we have to talk about that wrongfully has been put in the transfer news with AC Milan looking for him is Hakim Ziyech. This player, he has been the preseason star at the moment. This is the Ajax player that we signed at the minute. Still only 28 years of age. Again, injured at the start of the season last year in a preseason fixture against Brighton. Didn't come in till kind of a good bit through the season. Stop, start. Lampard playing him in, not playing him, out of position. And look, this isn't a knock on Lampard. I mean, at the end of the day, he was still a fairly novice manager when dealing with these big name players. You know what I mean? Dealing with these superstars.
I think when he came back in as well, did he get another knock or another niggle shortly after again, and he was out again?
He did.
If I'm right, I was thinking that as well. Yeah.
But then, if you remember, near the end of the season, again, he's another player that stepped up, scored the winner against Man City to get us through to the FA Cup final. Scored a couple of goals in the Champions League as well to get us, against Porto. I think he scored the winning goal. Well, one of the goals. It wasn't the winning goal. So a player definitely that's kind of been just laying silently in the wings that you forget that you have. And good Lord, if you have the Ajax Hakim Ziyech, which looks like we do at the moment, and then some. I mean, you're dealing with another. Imagine, like, one thing we knew about Hakim Ziyech is his ability to put balls in and cross the ball. Good Lord, a Lukaku or a Lionel Messi getting on the end of them.
I suppose in terms of keeping options open and stuff like that, these are the players you need. I mean, you see it at City. City at this stage could nearly field 2 11s. You know what I mean? And I think it's really important in Chelsea's development as well that Tuchel has these options, because the one thing Tuchel will have realised in his first 6 months there is he'll have never experienced a dynamic schedule like the ferocity of the Premier League, coupled with a European run, coupled with cup runs and stuff like that. The toll that takes on a team is unbelievable, you know what I mean? And he'll have realised that in that 6 months, because, you were fighting on 3 fronts at one stage, and it was like games are coming at you thick and fast, non-stop and stuff like that. So you always need those options.
And that's it. And it was funny when I was looking at the lads today talking about fielding, City being able to field 2 teams. And at this moment in time, Chelsea aren't far behind that. No. When you really think about it, it's I mean, we're talking about the Hudson-Odois and the Pulisics and the Ziyechs. Good Lord, I mean, if you had, depending on what formation you're doing, you've got Mason Mount. Like, if you're looking at the attacking options that can play on the wings, also you're looking at Ziyech, who can play either false nine, play out and out striker or just behind the striker. You've got Havertz that can do the same. Havertz can also play on either of the wings. Mason Mount is the same. Hudson Odoi, Pulisic, Timo Werner. Some of the younger guys like that have looked good in preseason. Tino Andrin. Then you're looking at the back, like, I mean, you've Reece James still there. You've got Dujon Sterling, who's looked great in preseason. Asby. I mean, the defense, your man Jules Koundé looks like he's coming in now as well. Like the options there are unbelievable. Loftus-Cheek is back, obviously, after a loan and looking pretty good, and yet they still want another central midfield player. So it looks like City and Chelsea have done a really good job over the last. Well, we know City have done it with spending $1 billion since Pep is there, but nonetheless, it's still the team that they have. So we can fire shots and say that it's oil money or not, or whatever kind of money you want to call it. At the end of the day, it is what it is, and it's there on paper. And I think credit to the Chelsea board and I suppose Frank Lampard for kind of putting us back up in that position after kind of Antonio Conte there wanting to basically sign every 30-plus-year-old player possible, because that's what he likes, you know what I mean? No knock to him, but it is what it is. But I think that's why a lot of people are looking at Chelsea and City as that kind of standout. And I think Chelsea are almost like the second coming, aren't they, of City now at the moment, where they're even a little bit younger in that sense, that they've got these stars that, De Bruyne now is what, 29, 30, which is still young, don't get me wrong. But then you're looking at Chelsea and their next, and Kai Havertz, and they're literally 21 and 22. Yeah, you're going, good Lord, there's so much football left in these guys.
And I mean, City are fully aware of that. Like there's no naivety within this league about those top 3 or 4 clubs in the Champions League places, and knowing what they can do and what they're capable of and the business they need to be doing. I mean, Thomas Tuchel is fully aware of what Liverpool needs. He'd be fully aware of what City needs or United needs or whatever it is. They don't suffer fools gladly. And a lot of these clubs, if you look at the top 4 clubs, they're generally all in around and interested in the same players by and large. You know what I mean? So I just think it's kind of with Chelsea at the moment. The key thing for me, and we've talked about it offline and stuff like that, the pivotal thing about getting the right manager in with the right mentality and the right fit is absolutely massive. And Tuchel, I can't say enough good things about Tuchel. It kills me as a Liverpool fan, but you have to acknowledge it. You know what I mean? You have to acknowledge it. He's been outstanding. I mean, I don't think there's been a manager that's come into the Premier League in a baptism of fire, where Chelsea had so many issues to sort out from the legacy of Lampard in terms of the messing around with players. You mentioned Timo Werner and stuff like that and all, but also in a COVID year where so many players were either catching COVID or separated from their families and their loved ones, and all this kind of stuff that was going on, and trying to manage all that and to achieve what he achieved. It's unbelievable. This is what I said to you at the start of the show. I can't believe Chelsea aren't putting that more out there, what they achieved, because it was unbelievable. If I had turned around to you in December in the depths of the Lampard era and said, something, I think you'll win the European Cup, you would have laughed at me. You would have laughed at me. You would have said, well, just stop. You would have turned around and said, listen, I'll be happy just to get top 4. Let's move on. And to get that Champions League and to propel yourselves back up there again, from a marketing tool and draw value, was absolutely massive. And I still, to this day, looking at the summer, the way it's gone and stuff like that, I don't think Chelsea have marketed that enough at all. If that was Liverpool, man, we would, you know what happens when we win these cups, we shut down countries, you know what I mean, to let everyone know what we've done. And I know you'll turn around and go, Chelsea, well, they kind of get on with it and stuff like that, but that's a huge ace to have in your hand when you're at the level of trying to draw in a Lukaku or a Declan Rice or a Lionel Messi or any of these kind of players, you know what I mean? It's a massive thing, you know what I mean?
Well, you see,
if you were sitting here and you were saying to me, if Man City had to bet you in the Champions League final, I would be saying to you now, Messi will go to Man City. No doubt about it. You know what I mean? But the fact that you went out there and it was such a professional performance, and you looked like the winners of it way before you ever got to the final. You were definitely the class team in it, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, from the group stages on, even including Lampard's time.
Absolutely. You were the form team in it, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think that's absolutely huge. And I think that could be the card that if this Messi thing is going to happen, that could be a decisive factor, because I can only see silverware for Chelsea over the next 5 to 8 years, non-stop. Just constantly every year picking up silverware of one shape, form, or fashion, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, and it's nice to hear that as well. And I think there's a couple of other bits we'll take a look at as well. Obviously the current situation with Kurt Zouma. Obviously he's rejected West Ham. Fabrizio Romano and all has said that Chelsea were willing to accept, I think, a £30+ million bid for Kurt Zouma. He obviously feels that he's too good for West Ham, which is fair enough. And there's talk that could still be used in a potential deal for Jules Koundé, depending on whether Lukaku wants to go over and play in Spain. I don't think, I know the Spurs wanted Zouma. I don't think Chelsea will negotiate with Spurs, to be honest with you, because of previous, and plus, look, if I'm Kurt Zouma and I want to stay in London, I want to stay in the UK, I want to stay in England in general, I'm not going to Spurs instead of West Ham, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, we reported on Kurt Zouma last week on the transfer show, and the latest information we had was that he didn't want to be a make way for the Koundé deal with Sevilla, that he actually was open to the opportunity of potentially going to West Ham. That's what we last read. Now that may have changed in the last week, because obviously our transfer show
that's changed now. Yeah. Fabrizio Romano confirmed as well that he's rejected any kind of offer from West Ham. So I don't know whether that's a case, whether I see plenty of potential moves for Kurt Zouma where I think he would fit well within certain clubs. I mean, I think an Aston Villa would be perfect for him personally. Someone like him and Mings in a partnership is kind of a scary thought for for big clubs. You wouldn't really want your strikers coming up against those two boys. Kurt Zouma one's a tricky one for me. I've always been a fan of him, but I see why people aren't also. Even very sloppy on the ball at times, but great last-ditch tackler. He's commanding, but at the same time, I see why Tuchel probably doesn't fancy him in his team, because he's not as good on the ball. You know what I mean? Whereas Koundé is kind of like he's more of a Thiago Silva type player that could be molded into that type of player, and especially under the tutelage of Thiago Silva, you see the sense in that. And don't forget, this was Man City's first choice last year, ahead of Ruben Diaz. They were just priced out. So Kurt Zouma, it'd be interesting to see where he ends up and see what way it works. If he doesn't want to be used as a make weight, I still think he could do worse than going and playing with Sevilla, to be honest with you. I think he'd probably fit in there.
I just don't. I think he likes London, but as you said, I think the problem with his decision, if he thinks he's better than West Ham, well, then it's kind of where do you go? Because for me, I don't know what way you rate them at the moment, but it's probably yourselves, West Ham, Spurs, and Arsenal. Is that
maybe Arsenal are probably the way Arsenal are doing business? You'd probably be looking at their ambition anyway, which is a bit more than Spurs. You're probably looking at it and saying that Arsenal are probably, taking a step. It looks like Tottenham are probably the low of the bottom of the.
And this is Arsenal at a time as well where they need defenders. So it would be.
There's an interesting one. There's an interesting one, and we know that Chelsea have done business with Arsenal in the past as well.
Yeah.
So there's obviously a relationship there between the two clubs. So that will be an interesting one. Koundé coming in, it's worth talking about. Definitely one that at 22 years of age, up and comer. Interesting deal, I think. Not someone that would probably come in and be a shoe into the first team straight away, but definitely someone that can come in and play a lot of games and definitely learn under the learning tree of Thiago Silva.
Yeah, he may not get in straight away, but I think when he gets in, you're going to have a hell of a job trying to get him out. That's the problem with that guy. I think he's an outstanding player. I know Man United are hot for him like crazy as well, but they pushed the button on Varane. But I just think he's an outstanding player, massive prospect in that kind of age profile that Chelsea are thinking at the moment, which is huge because you could potentially get 10 years out of that guy at the club in the right environment, you know what I mean? Which is absolutely amazing when you think about from an investment point of view. It's literally nothing for a decade of a defender like that to go in there.
And we've always had, you know, French players have always, especially defenders, have always kind of really fit in well with the club. Nido just mentioned Marcel Desailly and Frank Leboeuf, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, William Gallas even for a while there. So it's an interesting one. And I mean, that's a deal that looks like it'll get done at some point. It's just a matter of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, because I think that's Romano has kind of said that one will pretty much happen. Personal terms are agreed. He's obviously chosen Chelsea as his destination.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a real statement signing for Chelsea as well, because, you know, everyone's talking about Messi and Lukaku and Haaland and Kane and all these kind of things, and Grealish and stuff like that. But this is a very, very, very good player at the right age going in. And I think it would make a statement from Chelsea in terms of what they're trying to build for going forward, as opposed to, you know, I mean, Chelsea probably could have went out and got Varane. Probably.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think if you're looking at the profile that they're trying to create there, I mean, you already have Thiago Silva in there. So he's your experience. So you've got Rudiger there, you've got Christensen, you know, you could have Koundé in there now as well. So you have all these guys learning from this guy who's been one of the best defenders for the last decade at least. You know what I mean? So it's
definitely go down as one of the best of all time for sure.
Absolutely. So I think it's a nice little blend that's going in there where he recognizes he has that bit of experience, and now he's sprinkling it with that youth to learn from it. But definitely with Koundé, from what I've seen at Sevilla and stuff like that, absolutely fantastic player. And I think if he gets in there, I think it'd be a real problem for, say, the likes of a Christensen or something to get him back out.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think it's a player that can play on the right side of the defense, where you're not putting as much, you know, pressure on Aspi to, you know, to play as many games either. Like, so you can kind of mix and match between him and Reece at right wing back as well, depending on who you're playing. And then lastly, we've obviously, you know, I suppose most people were expecting Declan Rice to sign for Chelsea this year as well. It looked like a shoe-in. It's not completely dead in the water, but I guess maybe West Ham have probably priced him out of a move to Chelsea. It looks like he's destined for that move eventually, doesn't it? With him and Mason Mount being so close, and obviously him being a former academy player. I think there's no way in the world you pay 80 million for Declan Rice. I'm sorry, I know he had a good Euros and he's a good player, but the fact that he's only got 2 years left on his contract now, that's a much more appetizing move next year for Chelsea, isn't it? Considering he's rejected a contract offer as well, but he's not requesting a transfer. You know what I mean?
He there's no doubt about it. Declan Rice will wear the blue shirt of Chelsea. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I think the question is, I suppose what Chelsea were looking at as well, there was few rumblings there about Jorginho and stuff like that, potentially wanting to go back to Italy, which was obviously dispelled straight away and stuff like that. Very happy with where he is and stuff like that. But I think if that kind of thing would have happened, or someone else in the middle of the park there would want to move on or a change, then that might change the thinking and trigger something.
Yes.
But I don't see, you know, I suppose it's a very weird transfer window when you look at it, because we can't judge anything based on the money, because it's just stupid. You got Grealish at 100 million, Kane at 150 million. You know what I mean? You've Lukaku at 100 million. Like, these numbers are ridiculous. They're just off the skelter at this
time. For any player, even if it was Ronaldo at 100 million, it's still mad.
And forget about the situation that we're in a post-COVID season where clubs have lost a lot of money and stuff like that and all. I just can't believe that these are the numbers that are going around. But then you see, obviously, there's clubs there like Real Madrid and like Barcelona, and they're going to be forced into a situation where they're going to give players away. I was looking at Real Madrid there the other day, and apparently they were linking Isco with Liverpool for like 20 million. Absolute steal for that player. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking, if you have 100 million lying around at the moment, if you give it, say, about 10 days, you can do some really, really good business in that market at the moment.
I'm telling you, I agree with that.
And I think the next 3 weeks is going to be absolutely unbelievable. I think you're going to see players coming into the Premier League in the next 3 weeks that we never thought would kick a ball in the Premier League.
Okay. So I suppose in closing, let's rate these transfer rumours just for a bit of fun between you and me from a Chelsea side. Rate these transfer rumors out of 10, as in 10 obviously being the highest, most likely, 1 obviously being the lowest. So we'll start with a couple here. That will happen obviously within the next couple of weeks. Declan Rice. We'll start with Declan Rice.
I'd only give it a 2. As you said, I think that's further down the line. I think it will happen, but I think it's further down the line.
So. Yeah. Okay. Let's go with Jules Koundé.
10.
Okay, so that's happening. Let's have another look here. What we have. Let's go with Lionel Messi.
I think just because yourselves and City, I think you're both somewhere around that 7-8 mark. There's a press conference at 11 o'clock apparently with Laporte, and he's going to tell it exactly as it is. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that.
Interesting. Okay. Let's look at the other one that was linked as a potential backup, the 20-year-old defensive midfielder from Monaco, Aurelien Tchouameni. I probably butchered his name, but his name has popped up very prominently there in the last couple of days. No,
that's agent talk.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. So you're giving that probably a 2 or something like that as well.
1 or a 2, yeah. I think if Chelsea are going to make changes in midfield, I think what they'll do, they'll probably do a pre-contract with Declan Rice in January or something like that.
Yeah. I was thinking
that would be the thing to do there.
And then I suppose it only really leaves us with one left, and it's the big Belgian number 9, big Romelu Lukaku.
It's a tough one to call now because of the Messi ace, really, isn't it? Because the question is, are Chelsea going to be brave and bolshy enough to do both if the opportunity presents itself? I think if they get word that Messi's thoughts are with Man City, I think Romelu Lukaku is a shoe-in. It's a 10. I don't think Milan can refuse your money. I know they've had their financial issues and stuff like that. I mean, the talk at the moment is that they're potentially going to let Lukaku go and Lautaro Martinez. And that's like just crazy when you think
I honestly couldn't see both going, to be fair.
I was listening to one of the agents this morning and he said they're open to both going, which I couldn't believe, because I thought, my thinking on it was that if you got in there straight away and did the deal for Lukaku, Arsenal would be told to take a hike. It's not happening because they'd have to keep one or the other. But now the talk is they're happy enough to let both go because Inzaghi has gone in there and they're not going to be giving him much money to spend. And the problem with Inzaghi as well is...
I heard he's not happy already, yeah?
No, well, look, I mean, why would he be? You know what I mean? All his assets are getting sold. You know what I mean? But it's a case as well of that, like, he's renowned for having to go in there as a stopgap to blood youth and stuff like that. He did it at Lazio. So that's the problem that you're going to have there. Are they going to sell off their assets to balance the books? Because obviously they don't want to find themselves in a Barcelona or a Real Madrid situation as well. And especially being, you know, Serie A champions and stuff like that, there's an expectation. But I think Inzaghi's gone in there because it's a weird appointment as well when you think about it. I think he's gone in there as a stopgap. And I think he's being told, listen, you're going in there for 2 or 3 years. We have to sell off these guys because we've huge financial. I mean, they sold off like the team in China and they sold off a load of other business interests to balance the books. They were in serious trouble. And I think he's being told, look, we have to sell off these assets. We understand where you're going to be. I don't see Inter Milan doing anything in the league this year, especially if they sell Lukaku and Martinez. I think you're just ripping the heart and soul out of that team. And I think Inzaghi will just have to put up with whatever he has and maybe lucky enough maybe to get a top 6 or something like that. I think the great will fall, and I think that the lady of Turin will be back to its powerful self without a shadow of a doubt. And that's how I see it unfolding. And I think Arsenal are talking about bandying around serious money for Martinez, and I think they're trying to hook Hector Bellerin into the deal as well. Which could be appetizing for both clubs. And I know with Bellerin being so interested in fashion, Milan is perfect for him. And I just think
he's a prick, so it'll be good.
Yeah, and I think if you're offering that kind of money for Lukaku, I can't see Inter Milan turning it down. So I would expect both of them to go. Inter to struggle, and I think Lukaku would be a shoe-in. Where I would get excited as a neutral even though I'm a Liverpool fan, is if Chelsea were to go in and absolutely do both, then that would blow the register wide open. And I'll be certainly heading down to the bookies to be throwing serious money on Chelsea as Premier League champions without a shadow of a doubt.
And possible defending European champions at that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, to sign both of them would send a proper tremor through the landscape of football, you know what I mean? And it could also open up the floodgates as well if Messi comes in and does a real good. I'm just dying to see Messi in the Premier League. I wonder, is he the guy that we all put him up there as being, because we know in the Spanish league he's
can he do it on a rainy night in Stoke on
you know what Tuesday? I mean? Yeah, because I mean, you think about it at an international level, he's always struggled. You know, I know they just won the Copa America, but I mean, he's always struggled at an international level. He's always struggled at a World Cup. You know what I mean? So is he that guy that can step out of La Liga, come into the Premier League, which we know is the toughest league in the world, without a shadow of a doubt? And will he get that time and space to be that brilliant player that we know he is? Or will he just get absolutely upended in the Premier League, you know?
And that's why I would not be willing to forego the signing of Big Rom in order to get Messi in. So I'm going to say it right here now. I haven't given my opinion on it properly. But yes, I'm not willing to turn my back on the potential homecoming of Romelu Lukaku for a shiny new toy that's available. I want him first and foremost. I have to say, I'm thinking with my football head here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Roman loves those shiny new toys though, doesn't he?
Yes, and that's why I'm saying if he wants to get that plus that surprise under the Christmas tree, then I would gladly accept. But I think if you're throwing 300, 400, 500 grand a week at Messi and then getting rid of the Lukaku deal, which you would just slight him then, especially when the lad was saying he was happy at Inter. But then when he saw Chelsea's interest was serious, he's thinking, right, I'm coming home.
Yeah.
And then if you left him in the dark there, he's going to tell you to fuck off if you come in again, if it doesn't work out with Messi, Yeah. So
you can be guaranteed into the early hours of the morning, Kane's representatives, Lukaku's representatives, they are all on the blower to these clubs right now trying to sort this shit out, because this has caused a rupture in football.
Listen, I would say Daniel Levy is even talking to Marina saying, look, we weren't willing to let Harry Kane go to you before. Interested? Do you want to have a conversation?
Harry Kane
would be like, no.
Yeah, Harry Kane is never a Chelsea player.
I'd rather a Harry Christian, to be honest with you.
Forget about even the London links and Spurs and stuff like that. No. He's the opposite of what Tuchel and Chelsea would expect.
No, he's not for me. A great player and all that, but not for me. I suppose we should finish off with some potential outgoings that you want to rate out of 10 here. That and I'm looking at players that have realistically been told that they're leaving. I'm going to do this one for you first so you can get it out of the way quickly. Jorginho, you don't see anything in that?
No, I think he's happy now.
Yeah, 100%. I think he was always happy, to be fair. I think that was just the agent trying to talk shite as they do at this time of the year.
I suppose it was just it was the testing of the water, I'd say.
It's a new contract deal. That's what that is. Another one was obviously Kurt Zouma. Let's get him out of the way. You think he's gone? Yeah,
I think he has to go. Yeah, to me that's a 10. The reason for that is I think once you win a European Cup like that, and you'll remember it from when you won that one as well. I think once you win that, it's a different step up. It's a different level. And obviously there's players within your squad that fall out of that will never reach that level. And unfortunately, Kurt Zouma was one of those guys. I don't see him having a future at Chelsea. I don't see him stepping up the way a Rudiger has stepped up. You know what I mean? The way a Havertz has stepped up, the way a Mason Mount has stepped up. I don't see him having that level in him. I think he's a very, very good player, and I think he'd be, as you said, he'd be a great signing for Villa or someone like that. But I think that's his level.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to stay with two more defenders actually, purely because they're negotiating new contracts and nothing's been sealed yet. We'll start with Andreas Christensen first, another player that stepped up big time.
Yeah, absolutely. real good player. Got injured, of course, but I think he's. I like him, but I think I would say out of that back 3 or 4 that are there, I'd say he might be the least favoured by Tuchel. So I think if there was a change coming in your defence, I think he could potentially be that guy if a change is coming. And that's why I mentioned if Koundé was coming in, I think he'd be the guy that Koundé could take out of that team, and then he'd have a hard time getting back in.
But obviously not being transferred, because you still need your
of course, you need but I don't see him going anywhere.
No. And then we'll finish with defenders. Antonio Rudiger.
Going nowhere. That's just a conversation that needs to be had. I mean, he's absolutely outstanding as a player. It was even, he was even unbelievable in the Euros. This is a guy. He's everything you now want in a defender. And the change in him from the Lampard era is just unbelievable. It's like another player. And I'm sure Tuchel has looked at that as well and gone, this is a guy who I can coach, who's exceptional. And look, he puts his body on the line every single time, and you can't ask for any more from a defender.
I was listening to somebody talk the other day. I can't remember who it was, but they said that he looks like a modern Marcel Desailly. He reminds him of a Desailly. Yeah, I was thinking that's actually probably a perfect analogy. Do you know what I mean?
He scares the shit out of centre forwards.
Oh yeah,
and that's the truth. That's the truth.
He looks like he's kind of tall and lanky and slim, but I'd say if you were standing beside him, I'd say the width of him is just he's got that Drogba physique. You know what I mean?
He has that. Who do I compare him to? He has
even Suarez didn't want the part of it with Atletico last year.
He has that kind of look that when he stares at you, he looks like his stare would fuck you up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't think anyone wants a part of him, really. You know what I mean? I don't like that. That's a non-issue. You know what I mean? He just gets signed up.
So which one of Marcos Alonso and Emerson goes do you think? Because obviously one will go. It looks like I'm thinking Emerson might stay purely because of the fact that he played a lot with Italy and won the World Cup. And Alonso seems to be the kind of guy, the make weight that they were using for the Inter Milan deal as well. So you think Emerson's probably the more dynamic of the two?
Yeah, I think Emerson, when he's come in at times last season, I think he's shown a bit about himself that would please Tuchel. And I think also Tuchel would look at him as a player that he could work with and coach. This is the key thing really at Chelsea now. The key thing at Chelsea is you have that sprinkling of experience there. You have all this youth here. And Tuchel's probably looking at these guys going, can I coach him to that next level? And that's why we talk about Kurt Zouma. Can I coach these guys to that next level? And that's who he's looking at. And I think with Emerson, I think he's highly coachable. And I think anytime he's gone into the team there, you can see when Tuchel's coaching him, he's bringing him in to do a specific job. He listens to Tuchel and he goes and he does that job. I think with Alonso, I like Alonso as a player, but I think he's a bit of a loose cannon. I think when you coach Alonso and tell him to go onto the pitch to do a job, I think he kind of just goes into business for himself anyway. And coaches hate that. Coaches hate that. He's uncoachable then, you know what I mean? And Tuchel wouldn't tolerate that.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's how I assess both of them.
There's a couple of more players I want to talk about just before we end. Obviously, Tammy Abraham, it looks like a very strange move that came out of left field, but yet it's a Champions League move. Atalanta are looking to sign him, and there's a lot of weight behind this potential move here now. We're seeing some English players like in Tomori going from Chelsea to AC Milan, and we're looking at possibly now Tammy Abraham going to Atalanta, who would be replacing Zapata going to Inter in place of Romelu Lukaku. So interesting move, that, isn't it?
It is. I just don't see it happening. I don't see Tammy Abraham heading off to Italy at all. I just couldn't envisage that happening.
The Arsenal deal looks like it has a lot of weight to it, though, doesn't it?
It could do potentially. I know Villa are very interested in him as well, but they're trying to figure out what way that works because they're looking at trying to bring in United's Tunsabi as well. So that project at Villa is actually massive at the moment as well.
Very exciting, actually.
Very exciting if you're a Villa fan.
Villa's a team I always have a lot of respect for. You know, historically, my uncle's a big Villa fan as well. So And that's a very interesting project right now.
I think when you look at it as well, like you think about it, they're losing their best player to Man City and Jack Grealish, but there doesn't seem to be too much trouble there about it and stuff like that. Obviously, they don't want to see him go, but they see that the project that's at Villa at the moment is very exciting with the players that they're bringing in, and they're not too bothered about it because they know by the looks of things that the 100 million off Grealish is going to be available to spend, which means another two or three quality players coming in. You know,
that Abraham deal to Villa makes a lot of sense. I know some people think Ings and what's his name, the striker they already have there. What's his name?
Ollie Watkins.
Yeah, I mean, I still think Tammy Abraham is, he's a young striker that will definitely land. And plus, he's so tall. He's like 6'5". I mean, you can play him either of them playing off him, and it could be very exciting. And with Leon Bailey on the wings. But anyway, it's not an Aston Villa podcast, but appreciation for Villa for sure. Yeah. I think he goes. I don't think there's point in mentioning anyone like Pulisic or Timo Werner or any of them. I don't think they're going anywhere this year.
No.
I think that's pretty much it. But let's have a conversation about two midfield players that their name has been in the conversation this year for potential Ballon d'Or winners, and rightly so. Jorginho and N'Golo Kante. Two players, actually, that have really, really rejuvenated their career under Thomas Tuchel as well. And you were talking about coaches being able to coach players and bringing them to the next level. And like, even if they're older players, you don't have to be 21 to kind of, be coachable. You can be coachable and you can reach that next level at the age of 30.
Yeah, you just have to be open. You just have to be open to it.
These are two players that really, really shone, didn't they? Including Kovacic as well as another player. But obviously he was injured for a portion. But these two players, I mean, Kante and Jorginho, when Tuchel came in, my God, were they not outstanding?
Yeah, and I suppose this was at a time, if you think about it, like prior to Tuchel coming in, Kante was having his problems as well in trying to figure out that whole Lampard thing. Like, what the hell did Lampard want from him? It was kind of confusing, which was the case with a lot of players under Lampard. But I think once Tuchel came in, I think Tuchel's instruction, as we know by these German coaches, is very direct, very straightforward, probably a one-liner. This is what your role and job is. And he was very clear about that. And after that, then Kante just took off. What I would say is, I think if France had done well in the Euros and potentially won it, I think you could have just posted the trophy to Kante. I think there was no doubt about it. But there's a little bit of a question there now because you've got Jorginho there, who obviously won the Euros and obviously won the Champions League and got to a final of an FA Cup. We can't forget that either, even though he didn't win it, but was there. So he certainly must be in the conversation, you know what I mean? And then, who else is out there that's in the conversation that's in that kind of bracket? Because Lille won the French league, you know what I mean? And then you had Atletico won the La Liga, and then you had Inter won the Italian league. So there was kind of a mismatch in there in terms of who would be the Norman running partners in terms of the Ballon d'Or. I suppose Lewandowski.
So do you think if they give it to Lionel Messi, do you think it's a little bit ridiculous that they don't give it to someone out of left field like a Kante or Jorginho this time around, considering what they achieved for their teams and their country?
Yeah, but I mean, why would you get? I mean, it's hard to know really how this trophy is constructed in terms of how they arrive at a decision.
I would agree with that.
You know what I mean? And the problem is, Jorginho's one of those players as well. Like, he's not flamboyant like a Pogba or something like that. He's just a workhorse who gets on with his job. But
the best penalty taker as well. Good
Lord. To me, I align him with the likes of the Makalelis of this world and stuff like that, who just did an outstanding job, and that was their job. But they didn't have to vocally tell you about it. The proof was in the pudding, if you like. So, it wouldn't necessarily be the marketing choice, but certainly on paper, in terms of success and play and everything they achieved in the last year, certainly Kante's in there, Jorginho's in there. I suppose Lewandowski has to be in there as well after breaking Gerd Muller's record as well. He'd have to be in the conversation.
I wouldn't cry about that.
Yeah, Messi obviously has to be he's always in the conversation anyway. But I think
He
it's
won the Copa America as well, so
yeah,
they'll probably put down for that.
But it's an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity in football coming out of a COVID year to have a little sort of a changing of the guard and promote the likes of a Jorginho or a Kante or someone like that. You know what I mean? Instead of going with the norm, you know.
And doesn't it show kids as well that, like, you know, it's okay not to want to be the star player all the time that has to have his name in lights. You know, it's okay to be that dirty, and I don't mean dirty in terms of, you know, being a cheating player. I mean that dirty, gritty player that gets stuck in. I mean, Jorginho's simplicity of passing and his passing range has been unbelievable. I mean, if there's not a better penalty taker out there with ice in his veins. Like, I know in the final he missed one just barely, but I mean, Jesus Christ, that's a rarity.
Yeah.
The game before that, we were all going, good Lord, he's just took a penalty, and you're going, how do you even do that? Do you know what I mean? The stones you have to do that. You know, you have kids that play football. N'Golo Kante should be an ideal role model as to how to play the game with a smile on your face nonstop, not wanting more money on your contract every time you fucking renegotiate. You know, just happy to be at a team and be a part of it, and donating money to charities and stuff like that. I mean, so I think you're right. I mean, I think it's only right. I think the European champions should always get someone in the dance, and considering how dominant, as you said, Chelsea were in Europe this year as well. It wasn't just this wasn't a 2012 Champions League win. This was a dominant.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is you had quite a difficult path to the final. I mean, it's not like you saunter through. You beat the top teams and beat them convincingly. So I think definitely,
and we didn't just beat Real Madrid. That could have been 10 fucking nil. 10-1 bar that Benzema Butte goal.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, you're 100% correct. We absolutely destroyed them. And then realistically, it was a professional performance against Man City, but it was a very dominant performance in ways too.
Yeah.
There was there wasn't many scares. Do you know what I mean? So for me personally, I would give it to Jorginho just because of how underappreciated that he has been as a footballer. I think N'Golo Kante gets the appreciation for what he does.
Yeah.
I just think Jorginho this year, and plus he was Chelsea's top scorer.
Yeah. I always thought it would hinge on the Euros. I think if France had had a brilliant Euros and they had done really well, I think Kante was a shoe-in. But the fact that Italy went and won it, and France were kind of so poor in it. You know, the other thing I'd say as well, if Germany had done really, really well, I mean, Antonio Rudiger would have to be in the conversation, wouldn't he? You know, so I just
to be fair, you know what I mean?
And Kai Havertz, yeah.
You know, it's he was their top scorer as well. Don't forget. Yeah, this has been a fun conversation, man. It's been nice to have you on the Chelsea Roar, because you do so many football podcasts, and I hope Chelsea fans listen to this show have actually enjoyed your company. I think they did. I'm sure I speak for them all in saying that they did, because you're a football fan as well as a Liverpool fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's nice to be able to have football and conversations and talk about, I suppose, the prospects that the Blues have this year as well. And I'm sure I'll come on the Shankly sessions at some point. If you like listening to football podcasts in general, I would implore you all to go and listen to Niall's show, which is on this particular channel, the one you're looking at right now. The Shankly sessions with himself and Dino. They put out a great podcast every week talking about Liverpool, and it's always very honest as well. It's not your typical Scouser podcast where, you know, the original Ronaldo is going to come back from the dead and sign for Liverpool tomorrow. Trust me, they're very realistic conversations, and they give critique as well as praise where it's due. So, and then of course, Niall's baby is the upper tier, which is just a football podcast about football in general. And then of course you have the upper transfer show as well, where they do their best to give us up-to-date news from reliable sources, from the likes of Fabrizio Romano and all that kind of stuff. So it's not all hypothetical, but a lot of fun hypothetical conversations as well. So I do implore you to go and watch that, and you'll be seeing a lot more of Niall throughout the upcoming season. Who knows? He could end up being a co-host, depending on how fans take to this. I think they probably will, to be honest.
Yeah.
But Niall, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, as always. Yeah, I always enjoy talking about football. It's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, one of my favorite subjects too, especially now that we're literally 2 Saturdays away from the first. Well, Friday will be the first game, but we're 2 Saturdays away from our teams playing, and I, for one, cannot wait for it. And of course, next Wednesday, the Blues are going to be here in the Emerald Isle, playing in the Super Cup as well.
Super Cup, yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. It'll be interesting to see who's playing up front in that game.
Yeah, Messi up in the box with Rome and watching on.
Telling you, you know what? With this football club, nothing would surprise me. Yeah. Nothing would surprise me. But until next week, I've been your host, Ian the Dynamo Kelly, joined today by my co-host, Niall Shopkeeper Hogan. This is the Chelsea Roar, your brand new Chelsea show for the best Chelsea content that we could possibly bring you. And thanks for stopping by and listening to us. And until we see you next week, we are over and out.
Cheers.